February 14th, 1933. Valentine's Day. While the rest of New York slept, while lovers exchanged cards and cheap roses, 12 men walked down a narrow staircase into a basement in Harlem, carrying enough firepower to erase a name from history. One exit, one swinging light bulb, 12 loaded guns. And waiting for them, alone, stood a 27-year-old man named Bumpy Johnson. No backup in sight, no witnesses, no way out. Across the city, everyone understood how this was supposed to end. Harlem understood, the police understood, the underworld understood. Because the men in that basement weren't amateurs. They were sent by Dutch Schultz, the most feared gangster in New York. A man rumored to have personally killed more than 40 people. A man who didn't negotiate, didn't forgive, and never took no for an answer. And now, Dutch Schultz had sent his deadliest crew to Harlem to make an example. Not a warning, not a negotiation, an execution. 12 killers, one target. Bumpy Johnson was outnumbered 12-1, still learning the game, still building his name. Dutch Schultz was already a legend, rich, ruthless, untouchable. Everyone expected the same ending. Bumpy Johnson dead on a basement floor. Another body in Harlem. Another lesson learned. But something went wrong. 90 minutes later, only one of those 12 men walked back up those stairs. He was bleeding, he was shaking, and he carried a message so cold, so deliberate, that when it was delivered, Dutch Schultz, the man who built his empire on fear, went pale. Because that night wasn't just an ambush, it was a declaration. It was the night Bumpy Johnson became untouchable. And to understand how one man survived 12 killers in a locked basement, to understand why Dutch Schultz backed down from a war he started, you first need to understand Harlem in 1933. By 1933, Harlem was no longer the place America liked to romanticize. The jazz clubs were quieter, the poets were broke, the artists had traded dreams for survival. The Harlem Renaissance had burned bright, but the Great Depression smothered it just as fast. Banks failed, factories closed, jobs disappeared overnight. In Harlem, unemployment wasn't just high, it was devastating. Men lined up for work that didn't exist. Families stretched meals across days. Rent went unpaid. Evictions came without mercy. And when people lose everything, they don't stop hoping. They gamble. That's where the numbers racket came in. An illegal lottery run block by block, storefront by storefront. You could bet a nickel, 5 cents, and if the right 3 numbers hit, you might walk away with $50. $50, at a time when most people were lucky to earn $7 a week. That nickel wasn't greed, it wasn't recklessness, it was hope. Hope that tomorrow might be different. Hope that rent could be paid. Hope that a child could eat. In Harlem, hope became currency. And that currency flowed in rivers. Every morning, runners moved through the streets collecting slips. Barbershops, beauty salons, churches, corner stores, all of them part of an invisible economy keeping the neighborhood alive when the legal one had abandoned it. This wasn't about crime for crime's sake, it was survival. And that's why Harlem money mattered more than territory. You could own a block in Manhattan and still go broke, but control the numbers in Harlem, you controlled belief. You controlled loyalty. You controlled an entire community's last chance at something better. And across the city, a man was watching those nickels turn into millions. A man whose own empire was collapsing. A man who understood one simple truth of the underworld. Where there's hope, someone will always try to steal it. And soon, Harlem's hope had a target painted on it.
For most of the early 1930s, Dutch Schultz didn't worry about money. Money came to him. Bootlegging had turned him into one of the richest criminals in America. Warehouses full of illegal liquor, trucks rolling through the Bronx at night, speakeasies paying protection like clockwork. Cash stacked so high his accountants stopped counting and started weighing it. Dutch Schultz didn't just survive Prohibition, he dominated it. But empires built on one law tend to crumble when that law disappears. By 1933, the writing was on the wall. Prohibition was ending. Newspapers were already running headlines. Politicians were shaking hands. Legitimate liquor was coming back, and when it did, Dutch's illegal supply would become worthless overnight. To most gangsters, that meant adapting. To Dutch Schultz, it meant panic. Because Dutch wasn't a businessman in the traditional sense. He didn't diversify, he didn't share power, he didn't think 10 years ahead. He took, he enforced, he crushed. And now, for the first time in his rise, the money wasn't guaranteed. So Dutch went looking for a replacement empire. He didn't want scraps, he didn't want partnerships, he wanted something that could match bootlegging dollar for dollar. That's when he looked south. Harlem. What Dutch saw wasn't culture, it wasn't community, it was cash. Nickels turning into thousands, thousands turning into millions. An underground economy untouched by repeal, untouched by lawmakers, untouched by Wall Street. The numbers racket didn't care if Prohibition lived or died, and Dutch Schultz decided it would be his. But there was a problem. Dutch Schultz only knew one way to take things. Violence first, negotiation last, if ever. This was a man who beat rivals with his bare hands, a man who shot enemies in front of witnesses just to make sure the story spread correctly, a man who believed fear was more reliable than loyalty. When Dutch wanted territory, he didn't buy it, he buried whoever stood on it. That strategy had worked everywhere else. The Bronx, Manhattan, Brooklyn. So in Dutch's mind, Harlem would be no different. Send a message, kill the opposition, collect the money. Simple. But what Dutch Schultz didn't understand, what would cost him Harlem forever, was that Harlem wasn't just an operation. It was a neighborhood. And it had something Dutch Schultz couldn't buy with fear. Harlem already had rulers, not gangsters imported from downtown, not men who saw the neighborhood as a ledger. Harlem was run by its own. At the center of it all stood Madame Stephanie St. Clair. They called her Madam Queen, a Caribbean immigrant who arrived in New York with nothing and built an empire brick by brick, block by block. She ran the numbers not from shadows, but from storefronts. She paid lawyers, funded churches, supported families when the city wouldn't. To Harlem, she wasn't a criminal, she was infrastructure. And standing at her side was her enforcer, not a brute, not a mad dog, but a young man named Bumpy Johnson. Bumpy was different from the muscle Dutch Schultz was used to dealing with. He didn't yell, he didn't posture, he didn't rush violence. When Bumpy went to prison, he didn't come out dumber or angrier, he came out educated. He read Shakespeare, philosophy, history. He learned how power actually worked, not through fear alone, but through perception, timing, and restraint. In Harlem, Bumpy wasn't known for what he destroyed, he was known for what he protected. When numbers runners got robbed, Bumpy got the money back. When local shop owners were shaken down by corrupt cops, those officers suddenly found themselves transferred, suspended, or exposed. When outsiders tried to muscle in, Bumpy didn't always kill them. Sometimes he ruined their careers, their reputations, their futures. Because Bumpy understood something most gangsters never did. Fear makes people obey, but loyalty makes people stand with you when things get ugly. Harlem trusted him. That trust was priceless, and it was exactly what Dutch Schultz didn't have. In January of 1933, Dutch made his move. He didn't come himself, he sent emissaries. The meeting on 133rd Street wasn't supposed to matter. In Dutch Schultz's world, these meetings were formalities, a step in the process. You send men, they deliver terms, the other side folds. Everyone understands how power works. But Harlem didn't play by downtown rules. The club was already open when Dutch's emissaries arrived. Music low, liquor flowing, the room thick with cigarette smoke and watchful eyes. This wasn't neutral ground, this was Harlem territory. They sat without being invited. One of them leaned forward, voice calm, practiced. "Dutch Schultz respects what you've built here," he said. "He's willing to let you keep running things as long as you pay tribute." A pause. Then the real message. "Otherwise, this ends badly. Pay tribute or get buried." The room went quiet. Everyone waited for Madame St. Clair to bargain, to stall, to ask questions. That's what most people did when Dutch Schultz came knocking. But Madame Stephanie St. Clair didn't bargain. She didn't raise her voice, didn't threaten. She dismissed them. "Get out." Just like that. No fear, no hesitation. The emissaries froze, unsure if they'd heard her correctly. Nobody talked to Dutch Schultz like that and lived comfortably afterward. They stood up, faces tight, humiliated. And then one of them noticed Bumpy Johnson standing near the wall, still, silent. "You want to be smart about this, boy?" the man said, trying to salvage control. Bumpy didn't answer. He didn't blink, didn't shift his weight. He just stared. A long stare, the kind that doesn't challenge you, the kind that measures you. For a moment, the emissaries felt it, that uncomfortable sense that something had gone wrong, that they weren't the ones in charge of how this would end. They left, and when they reported back to Dutch Schultz, they didn't just deliver news, they delivered an insult. A black woman had dismissed him, a young enforcer had stared him down, and Harlem had refused to kneel. Dutch Schultz had built his reputation on one thing above all else, never letting disrespect go unanswered. You could steal from him, you could lie to him, but you could never embarrass him. And that night, in a small club on 133rd Street, his pride took a direct hit. Dutch didn't rage. That would come later. First, he made a decision. He didn't just want Bumpy Johnson dead. He wanted the death to echo. The message reached Bumpy Johnson just after midnight. A quiet word passed hand to hand, a warning whispered, not shouted. Dutch Schultz's men were moving. The target wasn't a person yet. It was money. Madame St. Clair's main counting house on Lenox Avenue, the heart of Harlem's numbers operation, the place where nickels became rent, groceries, medicine, where hope was stacked in ledgers and cash boxes before dawn. If Dutch took that house, he wouldn't just take money, he'd take control. Bumpy didn't call a meeting, didn't rally soldiers, didn't warn the neighborhood. He went alone. Some said it was arrogance, others said it was instinct. But those who knew Bumpy Johnson understood something different. Bumpy never rushed toward violence. He walked into it, deliberately. The location wasn't the famous Cotton Club tourists talked about, not the glittering downtown spot where white audiences came to watch black performers from safe seats. This was the real Cotton Club, an after-hours place, a backroom sanctuary for Harlem's players, where deals were settled, where money changed hands, where problems disappeared. The basement wasn't meant for music. It was storage, crates of liquor stacked against the walls, old poker tables pushed into corners,
chairs piled like forgotten bodies. The air smelled of dust, sweat, and stale smoke. There was only one way in and one way out. A narrow wooden staircase, steep, creaking, no side exits, no windows, no shadows deep enough to hide forever. A single light bulb hung from the ceiling, swaying slightly, casting uneven circles across the floor. A perfect kill box. If Dutch Schultz had designed it himself, he couldn't have done better. Still, Bumpy went down those steps, one hand free, no visible weapon, no hesitation. At 4:32 a.m., his foot hit the basement floor. That's when he heard it. Footsteps above him. Not one pair, many. Slow at first, measured, then closer. Wood creaked under weight. The staircase filled, and as the last step groaned behind him, Bumpy Johnson realized every good strategist eventually learns. This wasn't a warning. This was an execution. And the door behind him was about to disappear. The footsteps stopped. The basement filled, not all at once, but piece by piece. Men stepping out of the shadows, boots scraping concrete, coats brushing against crates, the soft metallic clicks no one ever mistook for anything else. Safeties coming off. 12 men, 12 guns. Dutch Schultz hadn't sent talkers, he sent his finishers. Tommy the executioner, Vento, Marty Icepick Delaney, men whose names circulated in whispers if they circulated at all, the kind of killers whose work showed up in police files with missing details because no witnesses ever stayed long enough to give them. They spread out naturally, instinctively, covering angles, cutting off the stairs, boxing the room until the only empty space left was the one Bumpy Johnson stood in. The bulb above them swung gently, throwing long, distorted shadows across the walls. Faces appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. 12 silhouettes circling one man. Tommy stepped forward. He didn't rush, didn't need to. Tommy had killed 16 men by then, always up close, always eye contact. He believed the moment mattered, that a man should see who ended him. He smiled. Dutch sends his regards. Bumpy didn't answer. He looked around the room slowly, counted once, counted again, 12. Then his eyes came back to Tommy. That all he sent? The smile vanished. That wasn't bravado, that wasn't defiance, that was assessment. See, Dutch Schultz's men were used to pleading, crying, bargaining, grown men begging for seconds they didn't have. They weren't used to being evaluated. Tommy tightened his grip on the gun. "You got about 5 seconds to beg," he said. Bumpy tilted his head just slightly, as if considering a chess move. "You're making a mistake." Tommy laughed once, short, sharp. "What mistake?" "You're about to be dead." "The mistake," Bumpy said calmly, "is thinking I came here alone." For the first time, something shifted. Not panic, hesitation. One of the men glanced toward the stairs, another adjusted his stance, a third tightened his jaw. 12 guns stayed trained on Bumpy, but doubt had entered the room. Tommy looked back at the staircase, empty, then back at Bumpy. "You're bluffing." Bumpy smiled. Not wide, not cocky, just enough. "Then shoot." Nobody fired. Because here's what Dutch Schultz's crew didn't understand. Bumpy Johnson had been fighting since he was 10 years old, back in Charleston, South Carolina. Street fights, knife fights, prison riots, territory wars where rules didn't exist and hesitation got you buried. He had learned something most men never did. Violence has a rhythm. And standing in that basement, outnumbered 12-1, Bumpy Johnson controlled it. Tommy's finger tightened on the trigger. Last chance. The bulb swung, the shadows shifted, and then Bumpy Johnson moved. Bumpy Johnson didn't reach for a gun. He reached for the light. One step, one punch, the bulb exploded. Glass rained down like ice, and the basement collapsed into darkness. Not shadows, total black. For half a second, nobody moved. Then panic took over. Gunshots ripped through the room, wild, uncoordinated. Muzzle flashes flared like lightning, briefly illuminating terrified faces, men firing at sounds, at movement, at each other. "Hold your fire!" Tommy screamed. "Hold your fire!" But fear doesn't listen. In the dark, Dutch Schultz's men lost what made them dangerous: control. And in that darkness, Bumpy Johnson became something else entirely. He knew that basement. He'd played poker there 100 times, knew where the crates leaned, where the floor dipped, where the tables scraped when pushed. He knew how sound carried, how boots echoed. Dutch's men didn't. They turned in circles, colliding with crates, tripping over bodies, shouting warnings too late. A scream cut through the dark. Then a body hit the floor hard. Another gunshot, another scream. But Bumpy didn't waste bullets. He used momentum, confusion, hands where guns couldn't reach. Men went down choking, crumpling, colliding. Some fell from blows they never saw. Others dropped from bullets fired by their own crew. Friendly fire. Tommy tried to regroup them. "The stairs! Get to the stairs!" Too late. Bumpy was already there, blocking the only way out. The violence didn't last long, maybe 3 minutes. 3 minutes that felt like an eternity. 3 minutes that decided Harlem's future. And then, silence. No footsteps, no shouting, just labored breathing and the faint drip of blood on concrete. When the basement door finally opened from upstairs, light spilled down the staircase like a verdict, and what it revealed was impossible. 11 men were down, some unconscious, some broken, some bleeding from gunshot wounds they hadn't meant to take. Not all of them dead, but all of them finished. And against the far wall sat one man still breathing, gun slack in his shaking hand, chest heaving, eyes wide with something close to terror. Marty Icepick Delaney, the only one left alive. Bumpy Johnson was gone, vanished into the night. He had left one man breathing, on purpose. The survivor didn't run. He crawled. Marty Icepick Delaney dragged himself up those basement steps inch by inch. Every breath felt like broken glass, ribs cracked, blood soaking through his coat, pride gone, fear doing all the work now. It took him nearly 20 minutes to reach the street. Dawn was breaking over Harlem when he finally flagged down a cab, waving blood-soaked bills like they were a passport out of hell. "Bronx," he gasped. "Arthur Avenue." The cab sped north. By 8:17 a.m., Marty Delaney stumbled through the doors of a social club that belonged to Dutch Schultz. Inside, the morning was calm, too calm. Dutch Schultz sat at a table eating breakfast, eggs, toast, coffee, the newspaper folded neatly beside his plate. A kind of morning ritual that said nothing in the world could touch him. Until he looked up and saw Marty, bloody, shaking, alone. Dutch froze. "Where are the others?" Marty tried to speak, couldn't, just shook his head. Dutch stood slowly. "Where are my men?" A long pause. "All of them," Marty whispered. "Down." The room went silent. Dutch's lieutenants stopped breathing. Accountants froze mid-step. Bodyguards shifted their weight, hands drifting toward their guns. Dutch stared at Marty. He let me live. Dutch's eyes narrowed. He what? He said to give you a message. Now the air changed. Dutch's voice dropped flat as ice. What message? Marty reached into his jacket. Guns came halfway out of holsters, but instead of a weapon, Marty pulled out a single playing card, an ace of spades, smeared with blood. He placed it gently on the table right next to Dutch's plate. He said, Marty whispered, Harlem's not for sale. And if you send more men, send more cards. He's collecting a deck. No one spoke. Dutch Schultz stared at that card for a long time. This was a man who had gone to war with Luciano, a man who'd murdered partners, rivals, friends, a man who answered disrespect with annihilation. Everyone in that room waited for the order. Send 50 men, burn Harlem to the ground, turn the streets into a graveyard. Instead, Dutch picked up the card, studied it, then he smiled. Not a happy smile, a resigned one. He's got balls, Dutch said quietly. I'll give him that. Boss, someone protested. We can't let this. Dutch raised his hand. You know what it costs to go to war with someone who's not afraid to die, he said. Someone smarter than you, someone with an entire neighborhood behind him. He shook his head. It costs everything. Dutch dropped the ace of spades into the ashtray, lit a match, watched it burn. We're done in Harlem. Let Bumpy Johnson have it. In that moment, legend replaced rumor, because the most violent man in New York had just chosen peace, not because he was weak, but because for the first time he understood exactly who he was dealing with.
To the outside world, Dutch Schultz's decision didn't make sense. This was a man who had gone to war over less, a man who believed violence solved problems permanently, a man who never backed down, not from rivals, not from partners, not from the law. So why stop now? Why let Harlem go? The answer wasn't fear, it was cost. Dutch Schultz understood numbers, real numbers, not nickels and bets, but consequences. Going to war with one man was expensive. Going to war with a crew was worse. But going to war with an entire neighborhood? That was suicide. Harlem wasn't just Bumpy Johnson. It was thousands of eyes, thousands of doors, thousands of people who knew every stranger, every car, every unfamiliar face. Dutch could send 50 men and lose them one by one, because Bumpy Johnson didn't stand alone, and Dutch knew it. He also knew something else, something men like him respected more than fear. Bumpy Johnson had proven he was willing to die, not recklessly, not dramatically, deliberately. Men who are afraid to die can be controlled. Men who want to live can be threatened. But men who've already accepted death, those men are dangerous. And Bumpy had done something even more unsettling. He didn't kill everyone. He could have, but he didn't. Years later, decades later, a reporter tracked down an old man who'd worked the Cotton Club back then, a man who'd seen things most people only heard about. When asked what really happened that night, the old man smiled. "You want the truth?" he said. Bumpy wasn't alone. According to him, Bumpy had 4 men upstairs the entire time. They waited. And once Dutch's crew went down those basement stairs, they locked the door from the outside. Trapped. If that's true, then the fight was never about survival. It was about control. Bumpy could have let them all die down there, could have started a war that burned Harlem to the ground. Instead, he chose something smarter. He spared one man, on purpose, because Bumpy Johnson understood something Dutch Schultz didn't learn until that morning.
Killing men starts wars. Humiliating them ends them. And that's why Dutch Schultz backed down. Not because he lost, but because he knew he had just been outplayed.
After that morning, something changed. Not loudly, not publicly, but permanently. Dutch Schultz never sent another crew into Harlem, never tested the numbers racket again, never tried to buy, bully, or bleed the neighborhood dry. For a man known for never retreating, Harlem became the one line he never crossed. And word traveled quietly, efficiently through the underworld. Harlem was off limits, because Harlem now belonged to Bumpy Johnson. For the next 35 years, Bumpy ruled Harlem's underworld, not as a tyrant, not as a madman, but as a guardian with teeth. He didn't allow chaos. He didn't allow outsiders to prey on locals. He didn't allow violence without purpose. His power didn't come from body counts. It came from code. If you robbed Harlem, you answered for it. If you exploited Harlem, you disappeared from it. If you protected Harlem, Harlem protected you. Bumpy understood something rare in that world. Fear breaks people, but respect binds them. And respect is never given. It's taken, carefully, decisively, and only once if you do it right. Years later, people would argue about that night in the basement. Some said it was skill. Some said it was planning. Some said it was legend growing teeth with every retelling. But no one argued the outcome. After February 14th, 1933, Bumpy Johnson was no longer just an enforcer. He was a line in the sand, a message, a warning. 12 men walked into a basement, 1 walked out, and Harlem was never the same. The streets would later say this was the night Bumpy Johnson became untouchable. But here's the truth most people miss. Dutch Schultz wasn't the last man who tried to break Harlem. He was just the first to learn the cost. Because the next deal Bumpy Johnson made would reshape organized crime in America forever. And it involved men even more powerful than Dutch Schultz. To hear the story about the deal that made Bumpy Johnson become untouchable man in the history of American gangster, click the link below in the description of this video to watch the video. Subscribe for more videos of forgotten gangster history. Comment, what would you have done if you were Dutch Schultz?